Joining us in Shenyang, Liaoning Province, Yao Shujie, Chair Professor from Chongqing University. In Beijing, Li Yong, Chief Researcher with DNC Think Tank, and also Zhang Gong, Professor with the University of International Business and Economics. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. The law is implementing on Tuesday. Now, many are talking about the devils are in the details, especially in implementation. Now, Professor Yao, I know you have been commenting on the upcoming law for quite some time. How concerned and how confident are you?
I'm very confident about the law being erected on Tuesday, because this is the first law to promote the private sector and the private enterprises in China. So my confidence comes from, number one, that the country really needs the private sector to be strong, to be very competitive in the market. And number two, the central government has made it very, very clear through the law that the state and the private sector, they should be treated equally. And there are very detailed mechanisms that are going to implement it to make sure that the law becomes very effective. So right from the central to the bottom, to the enterprises, and also to the general recognition of the importance of the private enterprises, I think this time China will make a very big step forward, not only to optimizing the development of the national economy, but also give the maximum power and opportunity for the private sector to prepare the country's economy.
Tell me more about the timing, because the private enterprises have been existing in China for decades, since the very beginning of reform and opening up. Why now, after 45 years? And what are the most important international and domestic issues that this law are supposed to encourage the private enterprises to do, and therefore to help China find a solution?
Well, I think the timing is very important, particularly if we are looking ahead, what is going to happen economically and globally, especially we're experiencing Industrial 4.0 revolution. And that, I think, will require relaxation of any kind of restrictions on the development of private sector. This is also going to be a cornerstone for the future development, and it is also going to be a stepping stone for the next level of industrial business development, in which new technologies, high quality productive, new quality productive forces are going to dominate. So the timing is very important, particularly if we're looking at the next year, which is going to be the starting year of another 5-year plan.
As we know, 57 million private enterprises, that counts for about more than 92% of the overall number of China's enterprises. So when you unleash the momentum of these entities, what is to come? That's really exciting in a way.
Well, this piece of legislation has a couple of chapters covering a range of areas. Some of it has really to do with the policy initiatives from the central government. Some of it has a lot to do with the protection of legal rights of the private enterprises. Let me be very straightforward here. I think the most significant part of this legislation is really Chapter 7 regarding the protection of the legal status of the private enterprises. And you asked the question, why now? This is a total repudiation of some of the practices on the part of local governments in parts of China, going after private companies in other jurisdictions during times of fiscal difficulties. And this is being rendered illegal by this piece of legislation. And I think this is a great achievement. It's a great advancement of China's constitutional rights, particularly related to businesses and private enterprises. So I think from that perspective, this is a huge milestone, a milestone that sets the stage for an equal footing between all kinds of companies in China, including private companies, state-owned enterprises, and foreign companies.
Among all the contents of this law, what do you think could really make sure fair competition?
The fair competition is that there would be a very clear nationwide negative list once the list coming out, it means that by law, the private enterprises can enter the market with absolute confidence. They will be protected by the law. And number two, in terms of financing, including the bank and financial institution, they have a legal obligation to provide credit in particular. They will be collateral. They're going to be making very clear, including intellectual property right, including their sales and other things. They are making very clear. The last but not the least is the protection of the interest and the property right of the private enterprises and the individuals. So this will give them confidence that the money they make will be legally protected with a very clear legal framework.
Now, legal precedence is always very important in the implementation of a new law. Mr. Lee, as this law just being implemented beginning on Tuesday, how do you see efficiently these legal precedents can be set? And how powerful will they become? What is there to make sure that these legal precedents can be powerful?
If a company is discriminated and unfairly treated, for example, in government procurement processes, if the private company that is involved in this procurement projects will have the right to, for example, to file complaint in court. And if that's I think that if the ruling is coming through, I think that is going to establish some sort of legal precedence. And that as an example. And of course, there are also other things, like the government engagement, government service, and all of those, I think, will require the government to comply with the requirement of the law. And they are not just in a position to provide services. They are not just required to provide information, for example, about government procurement. They also need to make sure that the private companies, will receive equal opportunity. They will be treated as same as any other type of enterprises, particularly state-owned enterprises. And in terms of credit, I think the precedence is that they need to treat the private sector equally.
Now, Professor Gong, I know you've been traveling in North America and Middle East quite frequently. If you look at the environment for business, it seems that every government is rushing to do something for the business environment, to attract the talent, to attract investment, to make sure it is going to be competitive and unleash the momentum. Meanwhile, they are also trying to, in a way, provide a favorable regulatory environment for businesses. However, every government now is also putting national security at the top of their tongue. Of course, developing the economy as well. How do you see this balance can be well kept, given China's example, since we're talking about this private enterprise law in China?
There are certainly differences. There are things related to fundamental legal matters, things related to the Constitution, things related to legal status. These things are absolutely not going to be compromised. There are things related to national security, which are also, very difficult to be compromised in my view, because these are things concerning fundamental national security interests. And there are also things related to policy initiatives, right? Related to, for example, promotion employment, related to attracting investment, related to, pushing particular industrial policy. I think these things, if you think about it, they have a pecking order here. Things that can be compromised, things cannot be compromised. So I think coming back to this piece of legislation, this concerns the fundamental legal matter here about the status of a private company. So I don't think any one bit of that piece of legislation should be and will be compromised at the expense or under the excuse of pushing some policy, some industrial policy, some other issues. I think this takes precedence in front of all the things we've just mentioned here. So I think this is actually very important. A law is a law is a law, and it shouldn't be compromised, and we should stick to it to the very end and 100%. So I don't see really a conflict here. When it comes to protecting private enterprises, any companies for that matter, there shouldn't be any second thought in my view.
How do you see China is making this fine balance between national security and also creating tremendous momentum in the society so that it can remain the most innovative and active society in the world?
I think the legislation, the private law, the private enterprises promotion law on Tuesday is certainly not going to compromising any national security, because the negative list, I think they would already more or less taking into account of what can be potentially threatening not only just the national security, but also the public interest or the consumer's interest or the conflict between different stakeholders in the markets. So China want to demonstrate it to the outside world is that we created a very freely competitive business environment. This environment can be conducive not only to the state sector, to the joint venture, to the foreign companies, as well as to the private enterprises. Now, actually, whatever the market identity, whether it is state-owned, private-owned, or foreign firms, they have to follow the national security minimum requirement. I think if we are doing business just to promote production, economic growth is fine. Getting access to financial services and the market of the private and the production factors is all fine, but you cannot violate the basic security issue. I think this would also be included in the negative list and regular guidance of other policy documents that need to be also at the same time complemented when we implemented the private economy promotion law. So one, it's going to be secure, and number two, it's going to be a very conducive market environment for all the market holders.
Yao Shujie, Li Yong, and Zhang Gong, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Appreciate it.